Welcome back to Jamie All Over. Today, I have someone I have looked up to for so long within the animal activist space. She's definitely one of my heroes, my idols, my inspirations. Leah Garcés, welcome to Jamie All Over.
Oh, that's such a kind introduction, Jamie. Thank you.
And just to give a little bit more context, because this podcast isn't quote unquote a vegan podcast, I talk about a variety of different things, hence the name Jamie All Over. But I am a vegan and an activist myself. What's great about the listeners is that they are so open minded. I don't hit them over the head with militant veganism. And today, I think it's going to be a really great episode because we are not preaching to the choir. We are not preaching to listeners who are already vegan. So the people that we're talking to are people who know me, know the show, and they're the type of people that will write, "Hey, do you have a way to veganize this recipe?" Or, "Thank you for posting that. I had no idea that was going on." And so that's the type of people that are listening to this show. We have turned thousands of people vegan, which I absolutely love, but most of them I would say are not. So I think we have a great opportunity today to kind of give them a different conversation. We don't need to go over how terrible factory farming is because they can watch a million documentaries and see that. I think what's most important is to talk about stories and changing a narrative. And you have done that so well with your newest book and newest initiative, Transfarmation. So I would love to start there.
I am so glad that you started with the need to change narrative. I think that is one of the most overlooked advocacy tools, or any tool when you're trying to change behavior and change hearts and minds. We go straight to the facts, but humans are not good at remembering facts or lists, but they are very good at remembering stories. And I really came to use this tool in my newest book, Transfarmation. And I wanted to bring up like a very interesting poll that was recently done that maybe brings to mind to your listeners why this is important. There was a recent poll done about American perceptions of the food system. And it really brought to mind to me how we're losing the narrative battle. So while many of us know the facts of factory farming, how it impacts animals, the environment, this poll showed that the majority of Americans still have a very benevolent view of the food system. So it really brought home to me the need for stories. And my book I went into the field to try to find stories that would change people's hearts and minds, whether and it was straight from people who are experiencing factory farming or animals that are experiencing factory farming.
Yeah, I mean, they'll look at a brand like Tyson and they'll think positive thoughts about that company, like, "Oh, that's a good brand. I feel good about buying something by Tyson." And that
That's
blows my
exactly what
mind.
was in the poll, Jamie. Did you read the poll?
Yes, it blows
Yes.
my mind.
Right. So one of the most I don't know, devastating facts in this poll was that the majority of Americans have a positive or strongly positive view of Tyson, meaning when they're walking down the aisle and they're looking at these plastic wrap meats, they look at the Tyson logo and they think, this is a benevolent company I have good feelings about. When it is the opposite, this company is working against the interests of every American. They're working against the interests of animals, the environment, and the planet. And we need to change that story. It's unbelievable how we have lost that narrative battle and how much work we have to do.
Agreed. Yes. And I definitely want to get into chickens because I know that's kind of your big advocacy and your big platform is chickens and how they're so underprotected, even in the very abysmal animal rights that some animals do have. So I definitely want to get into that and Henrietta's story as well. But let's take a story from your newest book. I would love to start with that because what led me onto my vegetarian and then vegan journey was when I was a child and I watched Charlotte's Web. And Wilbur was the reason. And it was the story, right? It wasn't someone telling me facts and figures. It was a story. And I learned to connect the dots by saying, wait a minute, Wilbur is so cute and I love him. And although he's a fictional character as a kid, this was what I needed at the time. And my dad was cooking ham that night.
Mm.
And I just happened to connect the dots at that age. And I said, I don't want Wilbur killed for me when there's other things that I could eat. And so that's kind of why I go back to, I think stories are so powerful. So can we discuss Felix?
Yes, I hoped you were going to say that. Oh, yes. I'll start with the story of Felix. So there's a couple named Joseph and Erica, and they were from Jacksonville, North Carolina. And when the hurricane hit North Carolina, Hurricane Florence, it ripped through North Carolina. And being good citizens that they were, so Erica's a firefighter and Joseph was a Marine, they went in to try to help their neighbors and look for companion animals. But instead, what they found were tons of male pigs roaming around in the streets of North Carolina. So, what had happened is when this hurricane had come through North Carolina, it flooded everywhere. And so the factory farms themselves became flooded and the females were drowned because females are trapped in gestation crates in factory farms, meaning they are tiny crates where they cannot move around. And so when the floods came through, they drowned. But the males were able to break loose and they became known as the Hurricane Boys. And Joseph and Erica decided on a whim, really, to buy some land right in Duplin County, which is the most it has the most number of pig factory farms in all of the United States. They bought a refuge. It's called Sisu Refuge. And they began taking in pigs. And it started with the Hurricane Boys. I think there were 44 of them. And then it became other pigs that they'd get calls. They became known. And one of those pigs was a pig named Felix, who was a truck jumper. So a truck jumper is a pig, a piglet that squeezes through the bars of the truck and makes an escape. And Felix did this one day. And no doubt he was trying to get back to his mother when this was happening. So would have just been taken from his mother. And just to give you context there, his mother would have been one of those pigs trapped in a gestation crate, so narrow that she can't turn around. Now, pigs have this incredible urge, just like humans do, to nest right before they give birth. And so given the opportunity, Felix's mom would have built this beautiful nest. And I've seen pigs like put ferns and flowers and make beautiful nests. But instead, she was trapped in a crate, concrete slatted floor, wet, unable to turn around. This is what he escaped from. And he was being transferred to another farm where he would be fattened. And in this fattening farm that he was supposed to go to, he would have been kept in a narrow area. He would have been moved around a lot, and that would have caused him a lot of distress. Like it would be like us moving from a high school to a different high school to a different high school every month. Very stressful socially. And they end up fighting with each other, even biting each other's tails. And the industry solution to that is to mutilate the animals and chop off their tails without any pain relief. This is what he escaped from. He left his mother in this condition. He escaped this future of overcrowding, stress, and he landed in the arms of Joseph and Erica, who treated him like a baby, like a human baby. And he found so much warmth and love from them. They literally carried him in one of those baby carriers. They
Oh,
swaddled him. And he really missed his mother. He would try to like suckle on their hands or their elbows or their chins. And over time, he started to heal and he started to be strong and friendly. And eventually they moved him out into what was like a halfway area right outside their house. There was a gated area and he was welcomed by the potbelly pigs. They were the welcoming committee. Where he got used to being outside until he was eventually let into the larger forested area where all the other free pigs live. And I remember visiting there and we were bringing a whole wheelbarrow full of apples for the pigs. And I had no idea how many pigs were there. But when we brought the apples, they called out for the pigs. And all these pigs came out of the forest, including Felix. And he had 4 friends. And I remember they were named like Stewie and Pierre and some other pigs that he had made friends with. And so he was now living in this forested area with a family of choice, wallowing in the mud, eating apples, and living out his days. And, just speaks to what these individuals are denied in a factory farm, what they are capable. This was a pig meant to be bacon. Felix was meant to be bacon or ribs or pulled pork. That was his destiny until he jumped off that truck and fortuitously ended up in the arms of Joseph and Erica.
Yeah. And anyone who has a dog or a cat, we all know animals have their own unique little personalities, and they're denied that when their lives are taken and their short lives are filled with torture. And that is especially true for chickens. So
Mm.
I was shocked to learn from you actually. 90% of factory farm animals are chickens,
Mhm.
but they don't qualify for any protections.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So in the United States, we raise and slaughter about 10 billion with a B individual farmed animals for consumption. Of those, 9 billion are simply individual chickens raised for meat, not egg laying hens, just meat chickens. So those are your wings, those are your breast meat, those are your chicken pot pies, your nuggets. We're eating a huge amount. The consumption of chicken has skyrocketed in the last couple of decades. We've swapped out the red meats and we're moving to chickens. And there are you think of the size of one cow versus one chicken. You have to eat so many more chickens to equal the same amount of meat. So it's just skyrocketing. Now, on top of that, there is no federal legislation protecting chickens, despite them being the number one farmed and killed animal. They are specifically excluded, along with fish, from the protection during slaughter. So we have a federal protection which requires humane slaughter, and they are not included in that legislation. So there is literally no federal legislation to protect the most farmed animal in the United States. It is appalling, and it's very difficult to change. The industry has a real stronghold on our government, and changing at the federal level has proven very, very difficult
Why do you think they are excluded from the protections?
because they are, first of all, I think the biggest moneymaker. They're the biggest moneymaker for the industry. They don't want any kind of restrictions on the way that they're slaughtered. I think also, frankly, we relate more to mammals, and therefore there's more empathy from animals. We are more, whatever animal we're more like, we're more likely to protect. And so cows and pigs are, and obviously our dogs and cats. And so when we think of animals that are not mammals, chickens, fish, we feel less bad about excluding them, about not protecting them, because we don't have as much empathy. It's a speciesist approach,
Mhm.
and we're basically putting hierarchy on those animals that are closest to us as a species. But in reality, these animals, if you think of sentience, the ability to feel pain, to suffer, to have joy, to have needs and wants, those are regardless of if you're a mammal, fish, or a bird. Those are evolutionary, and they are not different for our cows, our pigs, our chickens, our fish. They all have the ability to feel pain and suffer, and therefore are deserving of that protection.
Yes, yes. Now, something that I think is extraordinary about you is that you are brave enough to enter into slaughterhouses. You've been in, especially with chickens. You know what that feels like, what the air feels like and smells like. You see these conditions firsthand. I have a twofold question is one, how are you strong enough to do that? And two, can you describe to the listeners what that experience is like for the chickens?
I don't know where my strength comes from. It does require a lot of mental and spiritual fortitude for sure. I believe this is my this is what I've been chosen to do, that I've signed a contract with farmed animals to protect them, and it's what I'll do until my last day. And any kind of mental challenges I have, I try to compartmentalize and consider the suffering that the animals are going through. And my difficulties are nothing in comparison to what they're going through, and I can overcome. I have a very stoic approach to things, that these challenges and these obstacles are meant to make us stronger. I also do a lot to take care of myself. I treat this work like it's training for a marathon. I take a lot of time to think about my sleep health, my physical health. I exercise, I meditate, I make sure I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. to make sure that I'm not showing up in a reactive, emotive way rather than like, I can do this. I have the strength. So I'm always working on creating a clear mind as part of my work. I feel that's important as activists. We have to create space for clarity of mind, which means you have to do the things like breath work, meditation, whatever it takes for you to get to a clear mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your second question? I
My
forget.
second question was if you can actually describe that environment walking into where these
Yeah.
chickens are housed.
Yes. So the first thing that you would notice when you walked into a chicken warehouse, a factory farm, is the smell. And you would open the door and you would be hit with this waft, this wall of ammonia and dust, and it would take your breath away. It takes your breath away. And your eyes sting and you cough, and your immediate reaction, every bone in your body says, get the hell out of there. This is a dangerous place. And then finally, when you're kind of clear your eyes and you look around, it's a sea of white. It is a sea of suffering animals, wall to wall, who are living on their own feces and unable to walk. And this is not an exaggeration for the listener. It's really not. And you can just Google Mercy for Animals, broiler farm, and you'll be able to see with your own eyes what this looks like. It's very simple. And what happens is these animals are bred to grow so big, so fast, because our preference as consumers is for the breast meat. And so they've, just like we breed our dogs for certain characteristics, they've bred the chickens for giant chests, and the chests are overweight and they flop forward and they can't walk. It's like putting a grape on toothpicks. And their muscular and their cardiovascular systems are overburdened. But none of that matters to the industry because they're just trying to get them to live to 6 weeks. They're babies, literally babies. They don't lay eggs till 6 months. So 6 weeks is what they're trying to just get them to survive. So they don't really need to think about their overall physical health. They're just trying to get them over the finish line in 6 weeks. And guess what? 5% of them die anyway. They can't make it to 6 weeks, which in 20,000 animals, that's hundreds of animals are dying.
Yeah.
They can't even make it to that. So when you look around, there's a sea of animals who have their legs splayed out. They're resting their chests on the litter. Now, birds do not sit. If you look outside and you look at birds, they perch. These animals cannot perch because they're deformed. We call them Franken chickens. And if you think, oh, maybe they're now bred to be docile, they are not. They have strong desires still to do all the things chickens want to do, because when they've done animal welfare tests on them and they give them access to painkillers, they will go for the feed with painkillers, and then they will start doing the things the chickens want to do, like flap their wings and dust bathe and nest and perch and do all those things. So that's their minds still want those things. Their bodies are suffering, a suffering ball of feathers. And when I've gone into these houses, I always pick them up and try to get them off the litter and give them some comfort, because the litter is very hot as well. It's composting heat. And the bottom of their chests are always raw and red, like bed sores, because they're sitting for so long. And they're so sweet. They're still they're like floppy cats. And they just want to have what every animal wants, which is comfort. And they want to have relationships and they want to explore. And they're denied all of that. It breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart going into these farms. And you walk around and people are not connected to this reality. And we've tried to create stories to help people really think about the individuals that are suffering inside these farms, that end up on the plates, that end up as the wings at a Super Bowl party, or, the breast meat fillet or whatever that people are eating.
Absolutely. And I think you can speak even more firsthand to this because you now live with a chicken. Is that right,
Yes.
Henrietta?
So she passed away,
Oh,
but
I'm so
yes,
sorry.
sadly, but she lived in a tremendous life. So Henrietta, I was working with a farmer doing an investigation where he was hoping to transition out of factory farming into doing hemp. And it was during COVID. And as we all know, during COVID, the slaughterhouses were like, just people were still shoulder to shoulder in the slaughterhouses. And as a result, a lot of people got sick and died, a lot of the workers there. And one of these slaughterhouses was supposed to take this farmer's chickens away, and it got backed up because workers didn't show up. And so they came to him and they said, sorry, I know we're supposed to take your chickens today, but we're not taking them. We're going to have to wait. And the farmer didn't have feed. It was August. It was like 3 digits, very hot. He did his best he could, but a lot of the chickens died because of the heat and the lack. They were just at their end and the lack of food. And when they finally did come to take them, and I didn't have any right to take them, they were owned by the company and they were the property of the company. They left about 20 of them behind, and most of them were on their last day, their last breath. But a few of them look like they might make it. And he said to me, if you want to take a few of them, you can. And I won't say anything. But he was going to have to hand kill those birds anyway that day. So I took 3 of them in my car and I drove 15 hours with them in my car from Texas to Atlanta. And for a week, 3 of them survived. At the end of the week, 2 of them did not, and because of the genetic issues that they were suffering from, but one of them did, and her name was Henrietta. And while most people think of that year as the year of COVID, we thought of it as the year of Henrietta.
Aw.
And she became best friends with my then kindergarten daughter, who also had no friends. And she's a very social girl and was having to do class on Zoom and lost all access to socialization. And Henrietta became her flock. They became best friends. And even I, who have been advocating for chickens for 20 years, was so surprised at the depth of emotion and the depth of connection and the depth of bonding that Henrietta wanted with us. And she would come when we called her. She was just like a dog or cat. I mean, she had preferences on the snacks she liked and didn't like. I mean, she would be insulted by kale. She'd knock it out of our hand, but spaghetti, she'd want it all day long. She loved riding the skateboard. My daughter taught her how to skateboard and the Roomba because she couldn't move very easily. So she loved anything where she got to move around and not use her legs. We would take her on the bike in the bike bag and then go to the park and let her explore the park. It was just the most joyful experience. And she brought so much curiosity and joy into our family when we needed it most during COVID.
Yeah.
She lasted 4 seasons, which is an absolute miracle for a broiler chicken who usually live only to 6 weeks.
Right.
And she taught us a lot. And I really think of her every time I'm thinking down, every time I'm down about this work, I think of a million Henriettas out there just thanking me for the work.
Absolutely. That makes me want to rescue a chicken.
Yes. It's a joyful experience. It's, they're just like dogs or cats. They really are, especially broilers. There's something about them that they're raised for meat that they're just so affectionate. It's very sweet.
I'm on the board of an animal sanctuary in Florida. It's called Little Bear Sanctuary, and we have about 200 rescued farm animals.
Yes.
We don't have many chickens, and I want to expand to take on chickens.
Yes.
I think it's needed, right? You don't hear that much about the chickens. And I think you're right, because people connect more with the mammals, and those stories kind of pull at their heart a little bit more.
Yes, which is why we ended up, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but we ended up creating an animation to try to create this bridge for people to understand and connect to chickens in the way that we connect to mammals. I do think there's a lot of opportunity to do micro sanctuaries, big sanctuaries where I think the more people can have chickens in their backyards as companions or in their homes, the more we're going to wake up to the fact that chickens are no different than the dogs and cats that we share our homes and hearts with, that just like them, they have needs and wants, they want to connect, they want to be free, and they want to have these lives, these interesting lives that our dogs and cats want to.
Yeah. And I think with part of changing that narrative, you mentioned your daughter. I have an 11-year-old who is vegan, and I see her school menu. Okay. And it's every day there's cheese, no matter what. They find a way to put cheese in it. Obviously, every day there's something with meat, multiple things with meat and cheese. But one day per month, they have vegan chicken nuggets.
Really?
And yeah, she looks forward to that day because then I don't have to pack her lunch that day.
Yeah.
She says everybody eats them, everybody loves them. They say they don't taste any different.
Yeah.
So if we can just start that young. And something like with
Mhm.
animations and the way that Charlotte's Web helped me connect the dots. I think that reaching towards this younger generation and changing the food in our schools can be a huge motivator for that.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that
I totally agree. There's a company called Rebellious Foods who is specifically working on chicken nuggets in school menus.
great.
And they're based in Seattle, but I have a lot of faith. I'm wondering if your daughter's chicken nuggets are from there because they're price parity and they are taste parity. Because if you think about it, what is a chicken nugget? Like nobody even cares what's in the middle of there.
Yeah,
It's very similar. You could put any kind of meat replacer in there, and it's the breading, it's the salt, it's the fat, and some protein. And
exactly.
but the cost to the animals is tremendous. It's tremendous.
Yes.
That's usually breast meat. It's tremendous. So those easy swap outs where we're doing like a vegan by default, where you're just swapping out and nobody notices, those are easy low hanging fruit we need to work more on. And Mercy for Animals is working on some of that with cities and counties to do these swap outs where it's the default is vegan and you have to ask to add the meat back in. And it's incredible when you do that. Something like 80% of people choose to stay vegan on that choice, on that menu item, and only 20% ask for the add on. And if we can kind of break the momentum, break the norm, we'll have so much impact.
Absolutely. So is it all of LA County that it's now the default is
Yeah. So
vegan?
we worked with LA County, and that's not a small
That's huge.
county. It's the largest county in the United States. And Mercy for Animals worked with the county for them to adopt a plant-based by default policy. And that means
Amazing.
their hospitals, their park and recs, their events. Also, we worked with West Hollywood on a similar policy. And I feel like that is the future. I feel where perhaps federal progress is going to be extremely challenging going forward. The majority of people live in cities, and we can change cities. And
I just
cities are open to that.
Absolutely. And I just saw today actually a map of the United States showing every single state that has less occupants than LA. And there's like, it was in the teens, the amount of states that have less people living there than LA does. LA is
Yes.
huge. So to
Yes.
do that, and I noticed that things kind of start in California, as far as
Mhm.
animals are concerned, at least, and they tend to work their way east. So this is such a great step. It's really phenomenal, really. I remember years ago, I was living in West Hollywood. I'm in Orange County now, but I was like, West Hollywood, it's progressive. I live here. What can I do? And I started this petition and this initiative to ask restaurants to make at least 25% of their menus vegan. And
Wow. Jamie,
I had,
that's awesome.
well, I didn't get very far with it.
But you tried. I
I
know that.
tried,
I mean, yeah.
I tried, and I didn't actually fully commit to it, sadly, because then I got into the restaurant business and I started my own plant-based restaurants and I focused on that for the last few years. But I'm thinking of bringing it back again because I had so many signatures on this petition and people were interested in that. And I thought, well, maybe we can start some sort of organization where they get a sticker on their window if they're
Mhm.
participating in this. You know how people have other stickers on their window, like, hey, we're
Yes, it's a
what's
great idea.
so hopefully I can start that up again.
I
But
think that's a great idea. And I always think that even if those initiatives are not successful, they're having conversations that are laying seeds for future conversations.
absolutely. I might have sit down and talk with a manager of a restaurant that doesn't have anything vegan on the menu. Maybe it's a vegetarian burger with real cheese and real mayo. And maybe after my conversation, the manager is like, you know what, we probably need to add more vegan options. And it may not
Yes.
be 25%. Like that number was completely arbitrary anyway, and you're right. It was just to get the conversation going and to plant that seed.
I always tell that to my team. We do a lot of federal work, we do a lot of state-based work, and so much of it you could see as not succeeding, but I see it as planting seeds. Every time you're able to have a conversation with anyone, especially a decision maker, you are getting them to think. If you even get that meeting, you're getting them to think and you're laying down the groundwork that will later lead to the changes we want. And if you look at like women's right to vote, it took 40 years of attempts, over 40 years of attempts. in the federal government before the right was given. And that's where we have to think. And every time those conversations, every time those attempts are made, more conversations are being had, we're raising awareness, and that's an important step in the right direction.
Yes. So I think we've laid a nice groundwork as to the why of transitioning farmers to plant-based.
Yes.
What came first, the initiative or the book?
The initiative.
Okay. So you have the initiative is Transfarmation, and the book is the same name.
Yes.
And when I heard this, I was like, thank God someone's doing this. I know the only thing I heard of this previously was there was a lobbyist working to end the dairy subsidies in DC. And we really need to fight at the federal level here. But also, we need something for farmers. We need a transition for farmers. It's not like we want to just put them all out of business. And I think what's interesting about your story is you used to think that they were your adversaries, but you have learned how to make them your allies. And you've actually sat down and listened to the farmers. And, just our default as an activist is you're slaughtering all of these animals. You are the enemy, but you have a different perspective now. So tell us about that and how this all led to your amazing initiative.
Yeah, it started about 10 years ago, actually, Jamie. I was working with a journalist from Reuters, and he showed me all these papers, and they were the contents of the feed given to chickens in one farm. And I said, where did you get this? Because it's commercially sensitive. And I thought he was going to say, oh, I stole it, or I did an investigation. And he said, oh, this farmer gave it to me. And I said, who? And he named this farmer Craig Watts. And I said, can you put me in touch? And we started talking and talking on the phone until I worked up the courage to say, can I come visit you? Can I bring a camera? And can I film? And he said, yes. And I really honestly, Jamie, did not expect the outcome because I expected it. It had been about 10 years since anyone in animal rights had gotten footage from inside a chicken factory farm. It had become very, very hard. So I was like, I'm getting in there, I'm getting the footage, and I'm getting out. But when I got there, I sat down in his living room and he started telling me his story. And I felt honestly so ashamed. I had never thought about this individual, that I never thought, why did he choose this? That he might be suffering, that he might be trapped. And it turned out he was all of those things, that he was trapped in the system in a cycle of debt and struggle and hated the chicken companies as much as I did. And I had been missing this person who could be my ally my whole advocacy career. And just to give the listeners the context there, the way chicken farming works is, so Craig, when he was in his 20s, he had wanted to stay on the land. He had wanted to be on this land that had been passed down 5 generations. And there was no other employment. It was one of the poorest counties in North Carolina. And the chicken industry came to town and they said, hey, we got an idea for you. If you sign this contract and you take out about a $500,000 loan, then you can be your own business person. And the deal was that he had to purchase the warehouses, he had to purchase the feed, he had to purchase all of the equipment. So 4 long houses made of metal. And if he did that, they would drop off chickens and then pick them up at the end. And then he would get paid each flock. And then he could pay off the loan that he had to take out like a mortgage. So he signed on the dotted line. It was a 30-year mortgage. And at first, everything went well and he got paid. But then it's a chicken factory farm. So the chickens get sick, they die, and he doesn't get paid for any of those dead chickens. But his mortgage stays the same. And so he started to fall more and more and more behind. And pretty soon he realized he was trapped, but it was too late. He was an indentured servant at this stage. There's no other employers around. There's no way out. And he has to just keep raising chickens. So when I met him, he had been doing this for 22 years and was fed up. He had reached breaking point. He'd had enough. And this is the story of thousands of farmers around the United States. So the majority, I think more than half of chicken farmers live at or below the poverty line in the United States, while companies like Tyson and Perdue and JBS are making record profits. So we've got this crazy disparity between the executives of these companies and the actual farmers who are raising the chickens, who are trapped, literally trapped in debt. And then you've got the animals that are suffering. They don't want to do this job. Many of them have a lot of psychological issues, a lot of mental health issues from the job.
Oh, I'm
They also
sure.
have health issues from their lungs being filled with this ammonia and dust. It's a horrible job. And I had never considered this. And so 10 years ago, it changed my life. And I started building allyships with these farmers. And over time, Craig and I started to dream of a way to help farmers transition out because we thought there's a lot of farmers who don't want to do this. And in 2019, at Mercy for Animals, I created the Transfarmation project. And at first, we just put up a website saying, we believe farmers don't want to do this. If you're interested, we want to help you figure out how to transition out of factory farming. And we got hundreds of farmers writing us overnight. No advertisement, total word of mouth.
Wow.
We were overwhelmed. And so each year we work with 8 to 10 farmers now to help them transition out. We film, we have them be spokespersons to try to, this is also about really changing the narrative too, to tell the American public, hey, you're being duped. You're being duped. You think Tyson's benevolent? They are not. They are not a family friendly, they are not a farm friendly corporation. These farmers are trapped. They don't want to be in this situation. And by buying these products, you're hurting the American farmer. And so we're also trying to change the story so then we can change the law, we can change subsidies, and we can shift away from factory farming.
Absolutely. And the subsidies is something that I don't think most people even realize what their tax dollars are going to. You know,
Yep.
you mentioned before there was a flood and the female pigs were trapped in their crates, which they shouldn't even be in the first place, and they die. And who pays for those losses? Our tax dollars,
Exactly.
which then in turn makes the person who owns that facility, it gives them absolutely no reason to have better conditions because they're not suffering the loss financially.
Yes. And that happened during COVID too. So because the slaughterhouses were backed up, there was no place for the animals to go. And the animals were killed on farm through foaming, through terrible methods. And the companies had no backup plan for this. And our tax dollars paid for that.
That
Tens of
needs to
millions of
end.
dollars. I think it was $42 million paid to the chicken industry to cover the loss because of the slaughterhouses being backed up and them having no contingency plan. If the company had to pay for that themselves, you can bet they would fix it overnight. But because they don't have to, and our tax dollars back that up, they don't bother. And this is a major problem. It's a major problem that companies are not accountable and that our tax dollars are always this safety net being wasted on a system that is cruel and that traps farmers.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think some politicians are opening their minds to this. I had Marianne Williamson on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and we were discussing animal welfare. And she's spoken out on that before. And I really appreciate that coming from her. And she said, you know, if there's anything you need me to repost or amplify, just send it over to me. She's really willing
That's
to do
wonderful.
that. Isn't that amazing? So I think politically, that's just an area we need to advocate more to change the laws, but also to bring more awareness on why these laws need to be changed. So many people are so unaware of it.
Yeah, Cory Booker is a lead
Mhm.
advocate. He proposed something called the Farm Systems Reform Act, and that was to put a moratorium on factory farms and also to do debt cancellation for poultry farmers, for chicken and any factory farmer, and help them transition. So this is a path we're really trying to follow here, where any farmer who wants to get out is given a federal dollar to some of our tax money instead of propping up the horrors and the mistakes that the industry makes. Instead, help these farmers get out of it when they want to, cancel their debt, and help them transition. And our program is about building models that show what's possible. So we've had farmers transition to mushrooms and hemp and microgreens and all kinds of innovative paths that do not involve any animals, but are still farming food. And the farmers are so happy when this happens. They have a lot of autonomy, they have a lot of freedom, they have a lot of innovation. But we do need the government to help with that transition, because the government got factory farming to where it is, and we need
Yes.
government to get us out of that too.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing 6 to 8 per year helping those farmers transition, that's phenomenal. But let's grow it. Let's make it bigger. We need
Yes.
help from the government to do that. And it's all connected. It's all connected. When you throw the health aspect in it and what we're throwing away on chronic diseases, and if we can transition a lot of these farmers to healthier plant-based options, we're sitting here talking about the ethics of it, but let's talk about the health for a second too. As our country can heal and we can stop wasting so much money on the healthcare system. So it's all connected. So the government does have an incentive to do this, but hopefully things will change soon. I think something that was really important that you had said in a previous interview, which I would love to express here, is it's harder to change half the people to become vegan, but it's easier if they consider eating half as much less meat. So if maybe we can end on that and the importance of that.
Yes, I strongly am against a purist viewpoint, which is a definite leaning sometimes of animal advocacy, which is wanting people to be vegan, and that's the only, like, it's an on-off switch, yes or no, are you vegan or not? And until you are, that's it. But if you think about the outcome that you just described and the number of animals impacted, it is far easier to get the population to eat half the amount of animals than it is to get half the population to go vegan. But the outcome would be the same for the animals. And so I strongly believe in all change ever has been incremental. The majority of change that has happened, it has always been in incremental steps. If you think of how many of us might have chosen to become vegan, it usually wasn't an on-off switch. It usually was, I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to cut this. I might do it before 6 o'clock. I might only do one meal a week. I might one day a week. Any step you're taking is a step in the right direction. Because the power, the most amazing thing about this work is we can have impactful change with every single bite. What other social justice issue can you say that? Can you say everything you do is making an impact? Any step you take is making, literally, you are having an impact if one of your meals is different, is vegan. So every meal, every bite is important and should be praised, rather than praising the not, praising the yes. Whatever you do is helpful and should be encouraged.
Agree. And I've noticed that as well with, as mentioned earlier in the beginning of the podcast, most of the listeners are not vegan, but I've noticed that not being judgmental towards them is the way for them to listen and to hear these stories and to not turn off this episode, because I respect them, I understand them, and I appreciate every little step that they take, whether it's getting rid of the dairy milk and exchanging it for a plant-based milk. I think that's to be praised. So every step counts, and it
Absolutely.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Everything that you've done over the years, 20 years now as an activist?
Yeah.
If not longer?
Yeah. I'm starting to be able to say a quarter of a century, which makes me feel like, I don't know, like some kind of wizard. But yes.
It's phenomenal, Leah. And thank you so much for everything that you do and for being here today. It's been such an honor to talk to you. Someone I just love
Thank
you.
you so much for having me. It was an easy and wonderful conversation. I'm sure your listeners love all your stories, and I'm happy that you cover this issue too, along with all the fun other things that you explore. It's great listening to your podcast. I enjoy it a lot.
Thank you so much. Where can people get involved or help Mercy for Animals, or even help this new initiative, Transfarmation? Where can people go to find out more information?
Well, we have all of our social media platforms, both Mercy for Animals and Transfarmation. So you can check those out on Instagram, on Facebook. And I also encourage you to go to our website, mercyforanimals.org. We need all the help we can get. So sign up to our newsletters, sign up to be a volunteer. We need everyone, wherever you're at in the stage of activism.
Amazing. Is there anything we didn't mention that you think is important to mention, or did we cover the bases here?
Go out and be kind to everyone.
Love it. Thank you so much, Leah.
Thanks, Jamie. It was a great conversation.